Okay, welcome to Exile. Today we have as our special guest Lloyd Daguilar. He's a radio talk show host in Jamaica. He's the host of Ring the Alarm at on Best 100 FM, and he also is. You can also catch him live on YouTube. The radio show is Monday to Thursday, 3 to 6 p.m. It is a very popular show in Jamaica. However, for us in outside of Jamaica and Jamaican diaspora, maybe for our benefits, maybe you could give us a little bit more information about the show as well as about yourself, so we could get to know your background a bit.
Well, let me talk about myself a little bit. I'm described here in Jamaica as a human rights activist, and I've been involved in human rights activism for many, many years. And I am particularly known for my activism around the Tivoli Gardens massacre in 2010. The security forces went into a place called West Kingston, and in particular Tivoli Gardens, and they massacred over 200 people. Officially they say 73. The people say at least 200 people were killed. And I was involved in that. At the time I had a radio program. And because I reached out to the people who suffered and I made contact with them, I developed a relationship with them. And as a result, I went into the community to try and see how to assist them in demanding justice from the government and so on, and use my radio program to publicize a lot of the things which were unknown about the massacre which took place there. And one thing led to the next. We formed the Tivoli Committee, and we pushed for an international inquiry into the massacre. We wanted an international inquiry, not just a local inquiry, because the history of local inquiries is that there's a whitewash and nothing happened. So we wanted the international community, the International Criminal Court to be aware of it and so on, so that there can be real consequences if anybody is found guilty or wanting or, that sort of thing. Well, as predicted, they had an inquiry, but it was not an international inquiry, it was a local inquiry, and it ended up being a whitewash. And so, unfortunately, nothing happened. So we're still fighting about that, but police extrajudicial killings has been going on in Jamaica for decades now, and there is impunity for police extrajudicial killings. It's not an exaggeration to say so. The United States just suspended the visas of some police officers that were involved in a police killing in 2003, 17 years afterwards, but that's another discussion. And I've been on radio for quite a while. When I lived in America, in New York, I was on a radio program, WBAI. It's a community-sponsored station. And I've been on about 2 or 3 radio stations here in Jamaica. This is my 3rd or 4th one. And so I use media as much as possible to highlight the corruption and the human rights issues that exist in the country.
That's fascinating. As for the viewers recognize, we also have Raymond Grant, our co-host in a residential exile from Jamaica, and myself, Asa Sue, as his partner in crime. What our program is interested in is exploring these different situations whereby nationals have become, all intents and purposes, exile either outside of their home country or within, due to philosophical or political differences with those who are in power. And it is something to be explored and to be brought to light. So, without further ado, I'll hand the mic over to Raymond. And
Okay, thank you very much, Asa. This is a topic near and dear to my heart because corruption was one of the factors that made me decide to leave Jamaica. I'll spare you and our audience the gory details, but in Jamaica, they have a saying, man no run from good, which means in English that people do not flee a good situation. All of who have emigrated from our home countries or the countries where we were born left what we perceive to be a bad situation for better or greener pastures. Um, so this topic is very dear to my heart. I think it's going to need more than the hour we have or so or less designated for it today, for the time we have designated today. So I hope Lloyd will join us in the new year again to explore it further. Before I go on to that, I want to urge our listeners to click the subscribe button and to click also the notification button so that you can be notified of our new videos as they come out. This will encourage us in this effort. Now, coming to the topic of corruption and corruption in Jamaica and the search for solutions. One of the things Lloyd just mentioned was the recent revocation of the visas of the so-called now disbanded crime management CMU unit of the Jamaica Constabulary Force, led by one Renito Adams, who was accused of extrajudicial killings in Crawl, Clarendon in Jamaica. Some say better late than never, some say not enough. It seems to me that we have to give up on the local institutions in Jamaica to enforce anti-corruption measures. I don't know, I'll ask Lloyd's perspective on this in a minute, because I believe the actual institutions that are supposed to guard human rights in Jamaica are themselves corrupted. So from the top down, and I'm talking from the office of the Prime Minister, the Governor General is a token person, so I'm a figurehead, so I'll leave him out of it. But from the top down, Jamaica's corruption is so pervasive that even when you struggle and get any kind of inquiry, as Lloyd participated in the Tivoli massacre, for example, there is no justice there at that level. I think the focus will have to be, and I'm hoping programs like this will help in that endeavor, is to bring international pressure.
yeah, perhaps since Lloyd is on the ground, so perhaps you could catch us up with a kind of a summary of some of the highlights or lowlights of the corruption situation in Jamaica.
Well, Raymond is quite right in terms of the general comments that he just made. Jamaica is regarded as one of the most corrupt countries in the world. Okay, I was talking about extrajudicial killings, and we also have one of the highest police extrajudicial killings in the world, and we also are one of the most corrupt countries in the world. It is estimated that about 270 million US dollars is siphoned off every year into the pockets of the officials of the public bodies and the politicians. 280 million US dollars. That's a lot of money that could be used for education, that could be used for health, that could be used to build the infrastructure in the society, because those serious shortcomings where health and education is concerned. And, people are crying out every day for help from the state, which is not forthcoming. So when that money is siphoned off and goes into their pockets, then the people suffer. And that has been a reality. He's quite correct also that the institutions that have been set up to monitor, to counter, to investigate, to stop it, are themselves corrupt, are ineffective for one reason or another. We've had the Office of the Contractor General, and that has now evolved into the National Integrity Committee, and all anti-corruption agencies are now part of one organization. We have had other anti-corruption agencies. We have the Auditor General, we have the Financial Investigation Division, several, including those that exist within the police force. But I would say that for decades now, not one politician, maybe there's one politician over decades that has been arrested, tried, and convicted for corruption. One out of a few that have been arrested, tried, and an attempt to convict them. So where the elites are concerned, there rarely is ever a conviction of their wrongdoings. And so people get frustrated, and we recognize that it's something, they do it with impunity, and there's just nothing that is going to happen to them. So the entire political system is corrupt. The bodies are corrupt. For example, there are about 190 public bodies, and they are required to submit annual audit statements or financial statements of how they operate. And at the last count, they said for the last year or so, only 4 or 5 of them submitted their financial statements. So that you just can't understand that the whole thing has fallen down. Some of these bodies are under the prime minister, they're under this minister, they're under that minister, etc. So that the ministers of government have to be held accountable for the bodies that fall under them, which are not submitted their financial statements. And why is that so? And so on. So there are some politicians in the last administration, about 3 or 4, 5, 6, 7 politicians were alleged to have mismanaged their ministries and allegations of corruption, etc. One minister was brought before the courts. He and his wife and his daughter, he was a minister of education. He was looking after, in particular university. They call it the Caribbean Maritime University. And the head of that university and himself were apparently stealing millions of dollars. And they were brought before the courts. And the minister's wife, as I said, his daughter, were also charged. And it appears that they're going to get away scot-free because they have a lot of money, and they can employ the best lawyers in the country, and they will find legal loopholes here, there, and everywhere, and they will get away with it, So it's very, very frustrating for the people. And I'll just make one more point, which is that we just had an election a few months ago, and nearly 70% of the people did not vote. Only 30% voted. So it means that there is even a legitimacy crisis of the government, because if 70% of the people didn't elect you or didn't vote for you, then there is a legitimacy issue. Plus, there are promises that by the Prime Minister, oh, we're going to fight corruption, or the leader of the opposition, we're going to fight corruption, but we don't see anything concrete in terms of what it is that they are proposing to do. And I will talk a little bit, I'll give you a chance to come in, but I'm going to talk about the People's Anti-Corruption Movement, which we have formed, and I'll tell you more about that, but I'll pause in case you have any questions.
Well, I think that is seems to be a trap that a lot of young country, and Jamaica certainly is a very young country, that from its inception, from independence to now, the idea of corruption and the idea of uh, self-serving politicians seems to have been normalized. You see, when it's not normalized and people can still call it out, and when it does surface, it holds a greater significance. But from the discussion and from what we have discovered previously, from the previous shows where we look into this area, it seems to be a very normalized thing. That's why that 70% of the people don't vote, and 30% vote, but both parties are filled with corrupt politicians, and nobody seems to mind because it seems to have normalized. But how do you wake the people up from this idea that, hey, no, normalizing this kind of thing is not acceptable, or that that you can take the corruption out of the system? Because if the basic structures and the people manning the basic structures of government are all in on the take, so who's gonna be able to do anything? Like, there's just too much rot there.
Well, that's a very good question, because the 30% who voted, the politicians went out and handed out money, enticing them to vote as well. The private corporations give money to the political parties, and they in turn, in order to get 30% of the people to vote, have to go out and give a $10,000 here, a $15,000 here. So that's right across the board. So again, that is another example of the depths of the corrupt system, the political system. Now, people ask the question, do people really care about corruption because they go and vote anyway? Well, it's not that people don't care about corruption. People know that the system is corrupt, but the people are not politically organized in order to challenge the system. That's really what the problem is. It's politics. Because the two political parties are, I call them different wings of the same bird. There's actually no difference between them. There's Tweedledee and Tweedledum. When one is in power, it's corruption, and when the other one is corruption, and they have they curse each other now and again. Well, you're more corrupt than me. No, no, it's you, and back and forth. But they have no program. They have no policy, and that is the reason why in the last elections, the opposition party was crushed, because it had no program. It wasn't out there saying, this government is corrupt, we are going to do this, we are going to do that. They didn't do anything, they didn't have no analysis, they had no program. So in response to your question, it is, how do we build a movement against corruption in the country? How do we take advantage of the fact that people are aware of the corruption, but just how do you fight it? That's really what the question is, the challenge is. So we formed the People's Anti-Corruption Movement, and we have written a letter to the Prime Minister saying, hey, you say that you will not tolerate corruption. We want a commission of inquiry into corruption, People's Commission of Inquiry into Corruption, and we also want forensic audit of the public debt. The two things must go together. because we recognize that money is being siphoned off. We want to know how much money, we want to know who's getting it, and we want to make sure that the people are not held accountable for paying debt that is corrupt. And the Prime Minister himself has said, he went to Canada some time ago and he spoke to Jamaicans in Canada. And he said very frankly, the debt is corrupt. And we would like to know from him what portion of the debt is corrupt, because Jamaica is also one of the most indebted countries in the world. And the IMF has stepped in, and the IMF has said, listen, the debt is the number one priority for your country. You have to pay back the debt. And if the debt is corrupt, why is it that we, the people, should be making all these sacrifices where money that should be spent on education and health is being used to pay back debt that is corrupt? So that's where we are. We need a political movement. We need to be able to educate the people more, point out very specific things that needs to be addressed, mobilize, and that is what I do on my radio program. I talk a lot about corruption. I try to recruit people who listen to the program, and you know, we have a step-by-step approach that we are going to take to challenge the entire parliament, the entire government system where corruption is concerned, and see if we can build a movement. And maybe like we see in some places in Africa and Asia and Europe where thousands of people take to the streets, maybe one day we'll be able to do the same thing in Jamaica, because nothing is going to change until you have masses of people out there in the street paralyzing the political system and making them know that we're not going to put up with it anymore, and there must be changes. Changes must take place.
In such a political system where you say 70% of people didn't even participate in the vote because they probably either deemed that the choices are non-choices, and that their voting for them is like affirming their legitimacy, so they don't vote. Or maybe those people just are too caught up in their day-to-day life to do any participate in the election at all, because they are belonging to the lower echelons in terms of income, and they have to work hand to mouth and may not be able to participate. So how to empower those people though? You had indicated that you've been at this movement for some time. Do you see anything on the horizon that would any come close to awakening this sleeping giant of the majority?
Well, I give you another example as to how challenging and how difficult it is. We have an organization here called National Integrity Action, and it is led by Dr. Trevor Monroe, that is a former political activist. He was involved in the left movement in the 70s, and he had formed the Workers' Party of Jamaica. And after the Soviet Union, I don't want to say came apart, but you know, after things changed in 1989, he no longer considered, they no longer consider themselves the traditional Soviet left. So anyway, the point is that there is an anti-corruption movement which has been formed. And recently, just to give you an example of even how social organizations are not really effective. There was a meeting, a public meeting apparently, and the American ambassador was there. And the American ambassador and Mr. Monroe apparently had a private conversation. And when the American ambassador spoke, he cursed him out. He said, "How dare you tell me that the government is corrupt, that Mr. Holness, the prime minister, is corrupt? that's what you said, and I disagree with you. The government is not corrupt. The prime minister is not corrupt. And he chastised them. And he says, as a matter of fact, we're going to stop funding you because we're not getting value for money from your organization. And Mr. Monroe, like a child, he didn't challenge the ambassador. He didn't say, yes, the government is corrupt, the prime minister is corrupt. He didn't stick to his guns. And he was very apologetic and, well, I don't know if I said this or I don't know. And within a couple of days, USAID said we are no longer giving money to the National Integrity Action Organization. We're not giving you any more money again. So it just goes to show that politics is being played at the international level as well, where even the United States, for political reasons, will tolerate corruption in the country because it suits them politically. It's unfortunate. I'll give you one more example. There are a couple of politicians whose visas were publicly reported to have been revoked by the United States. And very, very recently, I saw a picture in the newspaper of one of these politicians who was having a birthday party. And guess who was standing beside him at the birthday party? The ambassador for the United States was right there helping him to celebrate his birthday party. And if I'm not mistaken, the ambassador from Canada was also there helping him to celebrate his birthday party. So here it is. We believe that, you know, America is putting on the screws and maybe Canada is putting on the screws, but they have an understanding between them. And so the politicians know that they can engage in corruption and get away with it. And the US and Canada will use them for their own political purposes, et cetera, et cetera. So it just goes to show you the real depths of corruption in the country. It goes very deep, and we can't even depend on international institutions. We can't really depend on foreign governments to come to our assistance. It has to be we, the people. And I'll say one more thing. I read something some years ago where a former employee at the US Embassy in Jamaica, he said he caught some politicians, I think, in corruption and so on, and he was going to take action against them. I can't remember whether he revoked their visas or made something public about it. And he went to the ambassador, you know, to inform him. And the ambassador said, listen, you know, don't do that. That's not how it works. We talk to them privately, and then we will use them to our benefit, and that's how it works. And the individual said, okay, and backed off a little bit, and they work it out. So, so that's another, another example of how deeply corrupt the system is.
Yeah, I think the issue, you know, we can't depend on national governments like Canada and the US because recent events have proven that the US and Canadian governments themselves have problems with corruption. In Canada, we just had the WE scandal involving Prime Minister and his wife. So I don't think we can expect, so the challenge on the question of who is going to bell the cat, we cannot ask the cat to bell itself. I think there is a role for international bodies like the IMF. The IMF, under its new leadership, it seems from my reading, now this may not come out in the wash, but seems to be very much against corruption. And I think the IMF has some solid suggestions which we can go into in our next program about what countries can do to fight corruption with the help of the IMF. So that's one thing. I think the United Nations, I think international bodies of that level rather than just national governments are the place where that the issue needs to be fought. Um, we can't expect, although I give all credit to what Lloyd is doing and the struggle he's doing, and I think that's a necessary and important component, that local struggle, political struggle, I think that's necessary. But you face huge odds, Lloyd. Just this morning, there was a business tycoon in Jamaica, the gambling business tycoon Ian Levy, who has made a public pronouncement that Andrew Holness will go down as the best prime minister in the history of Jamaica. Um, and he's a supporter of the JLP. He's a well-known supporter of the JLP, financial contributor of the JLP. So when you have the vast majority of the business community party to this, when you have the whole judicial and security apparatus as a part of this corruptive process, when you have the political establishment, what have you got left? The churches? I mean, Jamaica is a very religious place, but we know how corrupt the churches are too. So there is a voice. Lloyd is like a voice crying in the wilderness. And I would urge Lloyd and his movement to contact bodies like the IMF and the United Nations, and maybe even the International Court of Justice, if he has not done so already. And I'm not saying that the IMF of the past would have done it. I think I have some confidence in the current leadership of the IMF. They're saying things different. Time will tell whether that is really just fluff. But I think it has to be a two-pronged approach. I think if the government is embarrassed internationally about some of the things that are happening in Jamaica, I think that will help. I mean, you need organizations with teeth. In Jamaica, and there's none. They have organizations that are supposedly anti-corruption organizations, but they have no teeth. Whereas these international organizations, not only do they have the clout of moral suasion and international pressure, they actually, like organizations like the IMF, can seriously dent things in Jamaica. So I think if you get bodies like that on board. Another thing that Jamaican people, Asa said something that was very crucial. The issue of corruption has become normalized in Jamaica. People expect it, from the lowest level to a traffic stop all the way up to getting a big business license. And Lloyd quoted some figures that the amount of millions that are being siphoned off in corruption. And when countries like Jamaica suffer this, like the COVID-19 epidemic has contracted the economy by 10%, and Jamaica is already a small economy. Countries like Jamaica cannot afford this, and the people of Jamaica need to realize that this means less money for schools, less money for all the things you talked about, social safety nets and so on. And the inequality in Jamaica that is there does not assist in the issue, because when you have this huge income inequality and wealth inequality that you have in Jamaica, the people with the wealth are able to manipulate the economy and manipulate the government to the way they want it to go. So one of the things that need to be fought in Jamaica is the inequality in the wealth of the country. I think the corruption, just like the crime, are symptoms, and if we're not careful, we are attacking the symptoms and not the actual causes.
Let me just say a few things. One, in response to the point about the IMF. I beg to disagree on that. I think the IMF is a corrupting organization. It has helped to corrupt Jamaica. It has corrupted Jamaica over many, many years. In many ways, they signed an agreement with the previous government And that agreement put paying back the debt first and foremost. And they had absolutely no concern for the people, for the social services that are required to be funded. And all they were concerned about is that the debt is the primary thing. And the then government under the People's National Party agreed with it. And it has continued under this government. I remember Christine Lagarde would come to Jamaica. She was then the head of the IMF, and she would hug and kiss the politicians and tell them how they're doing a wonderful job. At that time, the Greece, for example, was and Jamaica were the two most indebted countries in the world. And the IMF officials would say that they expected a revolution to take place in Jamaica because the payback agreement was so onerous. And I think there is no difference between when Christine Lagarde held the reins of the IMF and the person who now holds the reign of the IMF. The debt payback agreement is still there. And this government is as committed to the debt payback as was the previous government. They are at one where that is concerned. And whereas the IMF is intervening in some countries in Africa and Asia where bankruptcy is taking place because of the COVID pandemic. Nobody seems to want to talk about Jamaica and the debt payback rate, which is very onerous. Nobody's talking about that. And I guess they have an agreement with the government and the government is loyal and so on. So that's fine, but that's a problem. And there's one other lending agency, the Inter-American Development Bank, that loans lots of money to the government for all different kinds of projects. And lots of these projects are government administrative projects. No proper monitoring of it, no proper assessment as to whether these projects contribute to development or not, whether there is mismanagement. All of these issues are very important. Sorry. And I believe that any forensic audit that we do of the debt, I'm sorry, has to focus in particular on these lending agencies, International Monetary Fund and the Inter-American Development Bank. I believe that they contribute tremendously to corruption. The IDB in particular, there is what is called, I'm sorry, there's what is called the National Identification System, NIT, that costs lots of money and is part of the new fourth industrial revolution, technological revolution that is coming up, where they're going to be monitoring people. And the IDB is funding that. They fund the police, they fund all kinds of things. And I believe that that debt is to the IDB is corrupt and it has to be examined. So just let us be sure about where those institutions are concerned. Where the United Nations is concerned, the United Nations does investigate police brutality and so on, and they report and they come and they, for example, at the United Nations very recently, they dumped on Jamaica. They said, your police kills people, you have laws that the death penalty, the way you treat LGBT people, the way you treat women, etc. And a lot of countries came and dumped on Jamaica. But you're just going through a formality. It's nothing but a mere formality. It doesn't mean anything. Even the International Criminal Court because one of the things that we were pushing for was that what happened in West Kingston and Tivoli Garden should be investigated by the International Criminal Court, because those were crimes against humanity. But the International Criminal Court cannot intervene in Jamaica because Jamaica did not ratify the statutes into Jamaican law, that we need revolutionary change in Jamaica. That's the only thing that is going to solve the problem here. From my perspective, it cannot be reformed. The system, there is no sign that the system can be reformed, either with the assistance of outside forces or with the institutions that have been set up. It is as simple as that. The people will have to, at some point in time, make a decision that we are going to have radical change in Jamaica. The government system, the state, has to be revolutionized. It has to be changed. It has to be rebuilt with new principles, with new political and class control. The situation in Jamaica is a classic ABC argument for revolution.
I think it's thinking that you know, we can just form a political party and take power. You can't, because the very way to do that is corrupted.
Yeah, that's not what I'm saying.
The very way to do that is corrupted. So,
yeah, because what happens is that sometimes
in Jamaica has been very dismal. People have tried. I know.
Yeah. What happens sometimes is that you will have an election coming up, and you will have an organization that just springs up overnight. But it is an imitation of the existing two political parties. It doesn't offer anything new. And you talk about the church. The church is just as corrupt as the political parties are. Every year they have what they call a prayer breakfast, and the church and the politicians hug and kiss and have a nice breakfast, and they promise to assist each other. That was the agreement in the late 19th century for the church coming into Jamaica, that, hey, you can come in so long as you don't agitate where the slaves are concerned. You no agitation, and then we'll allow you. So as I'm saying before, now coming back to the point that we are making, tactically, you have to go about the thing tactically as well. And we're saying that we have written to the Prime Minister, we have written to the leader of the opposition. We're saying that we need a forensic audit, we need a commission of inquiry into the corruption, and the Prime Minister, depending on how they respond, we're going to take it step by step. We're not saying that this is going to lead to the revolution tomorrow, but you have to legitimize the actions that you take. And I believe that if we legitimize calling out a protest against the government and against the corruption, people will understand, and we'll take it from there. We know what our long-term objectives are, but in terms of the immediate situation, we have to take it on a tactical basis. We have to expose the system. We have to establish legitimacy of what it is that we are demanding, and we see where we go from there. But ultimately, there's no doubt about it. Revolutionary changes are necessary in Jamaica. It cannot be reformed locally, or international forces will never be able to reform it. We, the Jamaican people, are going to have to take decisive revolutionary changes, action to change the situation here.
Yeah, and the Jamaican people include us in the diaspora. I call the leadership of the Jamaican diaspora for not, if not leading the charge, at least assisting in this charge. Yes. Too many of our diaspora organizations have been co-opted by the Jamaican political establishment, and they are cooperating with the Jamaican political establishment. and this is prolonging the agony. And the too many of them have become social clubs, basically, where they are in Canada, America, Europe, and other Britain, and so on, and we're all living nice and happy here, and we're ignoring the suffering that is going on in our home countries.
Well,
And
you
so
know,
the
every year
diaspora,
there
sorry, go
is
ahead.
a diaspora meeting between the diaspora organizations and the government. They come to Jamaica and they have
Exactly.
a big diaspora thing, and ministers make statements and they hug and kiss and they say, well, what can we
Yeah,
do?
they've been
And
co-opted. They've been
yeah, they're
co-opted.
co-opted, and they are opening up the Jamaican economy to the diaspora to say, well, hey, come and invest and develop Jamaica and so on. So their mentality is, how can we raise money? How can we invest in Jamaica? How can we benefit from it? And it looks good from a photo op point of view, but the diaspora themselves will have to radicalize and realize that radical measures are necessary. Otherwise, you're part of the system, you're part of the corruption, you're part of Twiddledee and Twiddledum.
Well, that's a very sad note, because what we seem to have come up with is that a structure that is rotted out and is doomed to remain the same, and their international organizations are less likely to be vested in any material change, and even the diaspora may not be in a position to really exert any pressure, uh, even though they see the contrast between their own particular situation and the situation in Jamaica.
Right.
So so far, we're looking at just basically incremental move to try to bring up the awareness of the population within Jamaica, whom has remained dormant and have been somewhat comfortable with the normalization of corruption. As long as some of us get some short-term gains, like a few $1,000s for the election, then I'll go with it. That's at least slightly better than what my normal day-to-day, day-to-day kind of rut that I'm in. So there doesn't seem to be a singular point, a lightning rod that would awaken the population, or those people who are actually being victimized by all this corruption. I mean, in the case of, let's say, Cuba, right? They were the general population was waken up by uh, Fidel and their group, and was able to mobilize against all odds against a government that was backed by the U.S. Now, Jamaica doesn't have such a big backer, but yet the population seems somewhat complacent in this normalcy for corruption.
No, I don't like the word complacent, because I think it's the population is kind of waiting for something to happen. I believe that it's us, the so-called revolutionaries, that have not risen to the challenge as yet. And under normal circumstances, like even in Cuba, it was Fidel and Che and the rest who took extraordinary risk, personal risk, to go out there, attack the Moncada barracks, and were thrown in jail. And they left the country. They went to Mexico and so on, and they organized, and they came back as a handful of people. And they went up in the Sierra Maestra and they carried out the revolution, and the people backed them. But under normal circumstances, without leadership, nothing is going to happen from the people. But it's not because they are not conscious, or because they would not be prepared to back something like that. But that's the nature of the revolutionary process. It's it always happens like that. So I believe that the challenge is on us, the people who understand what is required, who are not prepared to make the personal sacrifice that is required to stand up, to say what is necessary, because we are afraid to use the word revolution. We're afraid that our visas are going to be revoked. We're afraid that we are going to be isolated and so on. And that's essentially what it is. Even when I'm on the radio, I use very sophisticated ways of spreading the idea of revolution. But I also have to be, sensitive and, well, is a broadcasting corporation going to come down on me for saying this or saying that, as they have done to me before? They have literally been fired from a radio station before. So it's up to us, to decide that we are going to be like Sam Sharp, or we are going to be like Toussaint Louverture, or who we are going to be like Nat Turner, and we're going to stand up regardless of the consequences, take a stand, and speak truth to power. That is what is required. We have to speak truth to power.
Yeah, we're gonna have to end it here, folks. We're completely out of time.
Yes.
We obviously have not exhausted this topic, and I think this will be our last broadcast before the holidays. We're gonna do another broadcast in the new year. So Lloyd, can we get a commitment from you now that we can continue this discussion in the new year?
Yes, I enjoyed it, and I certainly will.
I think this is a very important topic, and unlike Asa, I am optimistic. I have lived to see the Berlin Wall come down.
Mm-hmm.
So anything is possible.
Yeah,
anything is possible.
I think Lloyd is correct in that you need that certain somebody to lead the people. Otherwise, is for the average citizen who's being oppressed. They are being oppressed. they're having to deal with so much on their own already. So unless you have someone with a clear vision of the mission, clear vision for the country, and able to raise the support necessary, you know. So before anything could happen, it is unfortunately the so-called democracy that we're under is a very old institution and has not evolved in keeping with the changing of times. And so many people, because it offers them power, they have used this system to embellish on their power and thereby creating loopholes and corrupted areas and chipped away from the very foundations of democracy to benefit their own means or their own ends.
So on that note, I'd just like to wish all our viewers and supporters happy holidays. Be safe. COVID is still there. If you like what you have seen on our channel, do hit the like button and subscribe and click the notification buttons as well, so that you'll be notified of our next video, which will be occurring soon in the new year. So all the best to you guys.
Until next time, everybody.
All right. Happy holidays to you, Lloyd. We'll be in touch.
Take care.
Goodbye.
All the best.
Cheers.
All the best.